Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us on this holiday. And, thanks for coming in. Like I said in the lecture, this is very low key, very relaxed. We're not going to be covering any course material. This is just an opportunity for you to get to know me and for me to get to know you. Now, there's a lot of you guys, and time is a little short, so the me getting to know you part is going to be done through e-learning. So if you go on the course website on e-learning, there's a survey called an icebreaker there on the course website. If you have not already filled it out, you're welcome to do so while we're talking today. If you have filled it out, then you're welcome to just sort of hang out and listen in as I talk about my favorite topic of conversation, myself. Oh, there's a smiling face. So I want to tell you a little bit about me in through three different lenses. Then we're going to talk a little bit about the icebreaker survey and just make sure that we're all on the same page. And then you guys are going to have your chance to ask me any questions that you have. So about me, I'm going to tell you about me as a researcher, as a teacher, and as an examiner. Okay, so as a researcher, like I said on Monday, I'm a political scientist. And what that means is that I study courts as political institutions. So most law professors, they come in and their research, right, the paradigm of research that they follow is they read a whole bunch of materials and they sort of discern a pattern from those materials, and from that pattern they argue this is how the law is and this is how the law ought to be, right? So they're making a descriptive statement in that they're saying this is what we think is happening in the world, and then they make a prescriptive statement where they say this is how we think the world ought to be. Okay, and those might be the same thing, but they might not. What I do is I ask the question, why do courts make the decisions that they make? Okay. And certainly we can ask the question, is the law the reason why they make their decisions, or is it other factors? Spoilers, for about 75 years, social scientists have been showing that things other than the law play a fairly significant role in judicial decision making. Okay, now my own research and the research of some of the folks that I'm in dialogue with as a scholar suggest that it's complicated. The story is complicated, and sometimes the story that we tell ourselves as lawyers is true, and judges make decisions based on the law and the facts. But then there are other times when that's not true. Okay, so that's me as a researcher. As a teacher, okay, so here is my thinking as a teacher. My thinking is that the purpose of this class, of all classes, right, is to give you tools to build a better world. Not necessarily, and I'm not here to tell you what that better world looks like. Okay, that's a normative judgment that you have to make yourself based on your values. Okay, but what it means to give you tools to build a better world is that you have to understand the status quo. So you have to understand how the world is. So for example, in this class, We are going to spend the vast majority of our time talking about this is how you prove tort liability in the Caribbean. But we're also going to spend some time, a little bit of time, looking at alternatives and asking ourselves, is the status quo the best possible system that we can have? And you can answer yes to that, right? You can come to the conclusion that the status quo is worth defending. But you can't meaningfully defend the status quo if you don't know how to analyze the alternatives. So that's sort of how I am, and that's sort of how I approach the classroom. For you as students, right, as your teacher, as your lecturer, I have 3 expectations of you. Okay, the first one is I want you to be kind. Be kind to one another. Be kind to me would be nice, you know, but definitely be kind to one another and be kind to yourselves. This is a world, we live in a system that wants to grind you into dust. And the most radical thing you can do in response to that is to be kind. And that's a commitment that I make to you in return. Can't promise that I can fix any of your problems. I can't promise that I can guarantee your success in the class, but I can promise you that I will be kind to you. And that I will attempt to extend to you the same grace that I would ask of you when the world happens to me. Okay. The second thing that I expect from you as students is to be prepared. And so I expect you to have done the reading, to know what your questions are, right? The things that weren't clear for you, to be prepared to answer questions, to have reviewed the worksheet, made notes, etc. And that's really what I expect of you. The third thing that I expect of you is for you to be communicative. Okay, so you have to tell me what's going on, right? If you're struggling with the material, if you are faced with caregiving responsibilities that are causing you to not have the time that you need to study, if you are have new responsibilities at work, right? These are all things that happen. These are all things that you should feel free to communicate with me. So you never have to tell me anything personal. You never have to tell me anything personal, but you are welcome to tell me everything that's troubling you, that's causing you difficulties. Can't promise that I can solve any of it, but I'm always going to be willing to listen and to try and help you figure out a solution for yourself. So finally, how am I as an examiner? Now I want to sort of explain myself as an examiner in contrast with my colleagues. I have been advised that some of my colleagues have sort of very strict expectations for how they want your work product organized and arranged. And truthfully, to be very honest with you, there are sound and valid pedagogical reasons for my colleagues to do that. So I do things differently, but that is not, I'm not criticizing my colleagues when I say I do things differently. I just do things differently. I do not especially care how you organize or arrange your work product, because my stance is that one of the things that's important for us as lawyers is to be adaptable. you will be over the course of your careers writing to many different audiences with many different sets of expectations. And you need to be able to adapt your approaches to be able to meet lots of different expectations. So, you have been taught, right? You were taught in legal writing, you know, the IRAC system, you were taught the FILA system, right? Both of those are perfectly acceptable ways to arrange your writing. If you choose to arrange it in a different way, I will read it and I will pick out the places where you have communicated your understanding of concepts, because that's what I'm after. I want to make sure that you understand the concepts, and that's what I'm examining you on. Now, one last thing, it's come up in a couple of tutorials, so I'm just going to go ahead and say it. The Faculty of Law does require that you use the OSCOLA citation system for all of your written work. I require that as well, okay? But what I'm going to tell you guys is I don't know OSCOLA. American lawyers aren't trained on it. We have our own system. And so when you submit written work, I don't know if you've used the correct citation formatting, nor do I especially care. As long as you give me the information that I need to cite check you, I'm not going to raise a ruckus about the citation formatting. I will leave that to the legal writing professors to sort of to take you to task over. But you are expected to use the OSCOLA correctly. Okay, so you're going to have your opportunity in a minute to ask me anything you want on any topic whatsoever. But does anyone have any questions about what I have discussed over the last 15 minutes? What questions do you have about that in particular?
I'm just curious about your focus of study in terms of, you said you did political science and your research is in that area. So what would you have been most recently researching or published?
Sure.
What?
Sure. Right now, my research sort of goes in, I have three different more or less research tracks. One is on measurement issues related to lawyer quality. So in the judicial politics research, we sort of don't really pay a lot of attention to what the lawyers are doing. We really only talk about the judges, but judges make decisions based on submissions from lawyers, right? Judges don't sort of like, judges are not legislators. They don't like free range across the landscape, engaging in policymaking. They only respond to requests for action from litigants. And so we know that lawyer quality matters, but we don't have a very good measure of it. So that's a project. That's a project that I'm working on that's in its very early stages. I've been working on a couple of pieces that are related to a theoretical approach called jurisprudential regimes, which says that when a high court issues a significant change in the legal doctrine that governs a particular area, they change case outcomes. And that this is one way in which law actually matters in judicial decision making. There's more complications to it than that, and there are some pretty significant statistical arguments that the literature is engaged in, but that's one of the things that I'm working on. And the third sort of big stream of my research is related to most of the judicial politics research is grounded in and based on theories that are derived from what we call collegial courts, which are courts where multiple judges hear the same case. So national high courts, intermediate courts of appeal, right? Those are the kinds of courts that we theorize from. I argue that when we get to the trial court level, that those theories are not very useful. And there's, I have some pretty significant evidence, and but it's that's basically the story of my book, which is sort of the big thing that I'm working on right now. Is a book about, hey, trial courts are unique, and we should treat them as unique institutions. So I apologize for those of you who were incredibly bored by that. The danger of asking an academic about their research is they might tell you. So with that, if you were working on the icebreaker survey, you may have noticed that there's a question on there about your walk-up music. And you may not know what walk-up music is. It's a thing that is common in baseball. And I know that baseball isn't as popular in the Commonwealth Caribbean as it is in the French or Spanish speaking Caribbean. So I have a video that I can show you guys. But if everybody understood that question, then we won't waste the time. So just sing out if you were confused and you would like to see the video. Last chance. Fair enough. But did you understand it, Rihanna? Okay, good. So, all right. Well, it's no worries. Okay, so it sounds like everybody sort of understood that concept. So we're going to move on. The last thing that I want to talk about is there's a place on the survey for you to ask any one question on any topic, no matter how sort of silly or off the wall or weird. And as long as it is not the question, how do I get an A in the class, I will answer it. So with that in mind, so let's hear your questions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start at the bottom right of the screen matrix and work to the top left. And poor Winston just rolled in, so I'm going to skip him, even though he's at the bottom right of the matrix. Winston, what we're doing is on the icebreaker survey on e-learning, there's a place for you to ask any one question on any topic, no matter what it is, and I will answer. And so we're getting everyone's question. So if you have yours, you're welcome to go. Otherwise, we'll go through some other folks and give you a chance to think of a question.
Thanks, sir. Thanks.
So, okay, so we'll move on. So, Amor, please let me know how to pronounce your name.
Amor.
Amor.
Yes. I don't have a question at the moment. Actually, I'm kind of confused as to what you're talking about. The icebreaker questions on e-learning under the course?
Yes, it's on the course website. It's on Torts Lecture 1. So if you're in Lecture 2, there's not going to be anything in there. So let me...
Can I look at it and get back to you then?
Of course.
Okay.
All right, who's next? Markela, you're next.
Hi. So my question was, I think it was like with this degree, we focus basically on Caribbean law. I was asking if I could go to America and I would have to transition and do something different if I wanted to practice law in America.
So the answer to that is that the American bar is highly cartelized. And while there is a mechanism for non-American lawyers to come and practice in the United States.
Oh, I was born in America.
Sure, but you're trained. You're going to be trained here at UWI.
Very nice.
So yeah, so you are a non-American lawyer in that sense. But you do have to have a degree from an American law school to sit an American bar exam. You won't have to do the initial law degree curriculum that I did, right? So my law degree is a Juris Doctor, but it's the same law program as if I had gone to the University of Chicago or Duke University. The law degree is an LLB, just like what you guys get. So you wouldn't be in that program. You would be in a Master of Laws, and a number of law schools have LLM programs specifically targeted at foreign trained lawyers who want to transition to practice in the United States. But you do have to go through one of those before you can sit a bar exam.
Okay, thank you so much.
No problem. So, Celeste, what was your question?
Afternoon, sir. I think I misinterpreted the question because I did the survey yesterday, but I thought you meant it was just a random question for you. So if I remember correctly, I asked you what was your passion, like if teaching was your passion.
That's a perfectly legitimate question. You can ask that. When I say you can ask anything, you can ask anything. The only thing that's off limits is, how do I get an A in this course? So you can ask anything. So what is my passion? Academia has a really, is really good at sort of beating passions out of you. There's this tendency in academia to sort of become your work. Rightly or wrongly, right? Without sort of passing judgment on that as a choice, we can acknowledge that it's a common choice. Mystique, it's okay that you can't remember. You can ask something else if you can't think of it. So don't worry about it. Just think about something. Think of what else you want to ask. In terms of what are the things that I do when I'm not working, right? So what are the things that I sort of give my time and attention to when I'm not working? So I'm very interested and passionate about trying to about talking to people about the issues surrounding creating a just and lasting peace for Israel. And the reason for that is you guys haven't seen me in person, but I'm Jewish, and I am visibly Jewish. I keep my head covered. And so, that's sort of something that's very important to me. I am a gamer in lots of different meanings of that word. So I play video games and tabletop games, and I have friends that I play games with, and that's a significant part of what of how I spend my non-working time. But there's not a lot of non-working time, because between the teaching and the research and the service, academia consumes your life. And that's a thing that happens. But it's something that we work on together. So, okay. Danielle, what was your question?
Hi, afternoon. I actually had two. One of
them. You were only promised an answer to one.
Okay.
So you're welcome to ask both, but I might not answer both.
Well, one of them is in regards to a case. So I guess I can save that for later. It was just a case I was reading last night that I didn't fully understand. But my other question is, what common mistakes do you see students make in this course or when it comes to writing the exam?
Well, I don't know what common mistakes students make in this course because this is my first time teaching it. But more generally, the biggest mistake that I see students making is thinking that writing more is the same thing as writing better. In legal writing, very frequently, less is more, right? One of the sayings that a mentor of mine used to have was, in legal writing and at oral argument, he who says the fewest words, all else being equal, wins. And that's because he thinks, and I think, that judges are busy. Your professors are busy, right, when you're writing in law school. And so it's important for you to get to the point. And so I think that's the biggest mistake that I see UE students making, is let's focus on getting the point across and then shutting up. So Mystique is saying that there are lecturers who have minimum word limits, and certainly that's, those are different sorts of situations. I mean, I certainly, I do have minimum word limits on what I or minimum word guidelines on what I when I give assignments, but they are extremely minimal, right? So as in, you probably, if you're having problems hitting this minimum, you probably haven't answered the question. Okay, so moving on, because time is marching on. Alette, what was your question? Alette, are you okay? Are you with us? You can use the chat if you need to. Okay, that's fine. All right. Winston, do you see how the game works now? Do you have a question?
So, thanks for the answers. I didn't have any question, but thanks.
Okay, not a problem. All right. Melanie, what was your question?
Hi, good afternoon, sir. I was asking, in your opinion, what do you think the future of tort law is?
The future of tort law?
Yeah.
I think a lot of that depends on politics. So in the United States, there was this movement in the 1990s and the early 2000s among business interests in particular to engage in what they called tort reform, which was basically ways to make it less economically viable to bring a tort case. So in the United States, almost all tort practice is done on what's called a contingency fee. If you're watching the TV and you're watching the stations coming out of Miami, and you see like a lawyer ad, and the lawyer goes, "We don't get paid unless you win," that's a contingency fee, right? The lawyer agrees to represent the client in exchange for a percentage of the eventual recovery, but the client doesn't pay, and so then the lawyer just has to go and represent the client and run the risk of not getting paid if they lose the case. And that part of that is also because of the American rule that parties bear their own costs. And elsewhere in the common law writ, especially in the UK and also in the Caribbean, right, what's called the British rule applies, where the loser most of the time pays costs and attorney's fees for the winner. So the future of tort law, I think, is really going on, are there going to be sort of political forces that move toward, sort of the broader structures that govern tort liability, things like professional setting, fee shifting mechanisms, damages caps, right? Things that don't necessarily affect the doctrine that determines liability, but affects the ability of plaintiffs to bring claims in an economically viable way. I think those are the things that are going to affect the future of tort liability. And to be perfectly frank, I don't know enough about local politics to know whether these are issues that are political radar, right? It would require, most of these things would require legislative action. I think it's unlikely for the common law to evolve in these particular ways. So there'd have to be some sort of law passed by the parliament to enact these changes. So I think that, we're going to see some movement toward increasing liability for medical practitioners, making it easier to sue doctors and whatnot. And I think we're going to see some movement toward changing tort liability, related to things that are, sort of internet type torts, right? We're going to see some evolution in the defamation context. We're going to see some evolution in things related to privacy related torts. And we're going to see some evolution related to jurisdictional issues, right? So if I live in the United States, which has very lax defamation law, and it's very hard for a plaintiff to win a defamation case, and I defame somebody living in the United Kingdom, where defamation is actually very easy to prove, and it can be a ruinous sort of thing, where do I get sued? Do the courts in the UK have jurisdiction over me just because I made an internet post that was readable in the UK? Does that seem just? Does that seem fair? So these are sort of the things that I think are going to be like the big things that we grapple with in tort liability over the next 10 to 20 years. Okay, Mystique, go ahead. Did you think of another question?
I did, sir. Hi.
Right.
My question is it's like kind of two questions, like it kind of answers in one, How and why did you end up teaching at uni?
Okay, so so let me pull back the curtain a little bit on the academic job market. Okay, when I was on the academic job market 2 years. I was on the job market in 2018, 2019, and 2019, 2020. My first year on the market, I applied for, that was my ABD year. So I was finishing my dissertation and defending my dissertation and finishing my PhD. In that year, I applied for 75 jobs. I got 5 first round interviews, 1 second round interview, 0 offers. My second year on the job market, I had my degree in hand at that point, so I was a more attractive candidate. I applied to 126 jobs. I got 15 first round interviews, 2 second round interviews, and 1 job offer from UWI. So the answer to why did you decide to come to UWI is it was come to UWI or leave academia. Okay. But I'm not sure that why did you come to UWI, to the institution that you're at, is really the question you want to ask. I think the question that's sort of buried in your question, because you didn't know, okay, because you didn't know that I didn't have choices. The question that's buried in your question is, why would you apply to a place like UWI, right? Because most academics, right, if we are lucky, we get 1 job offer. Okay. Some people who are, you know, sort of the rock stars of higher education, they have multiple offers, they can make choices, but the vast majority of us will have 1 offer or 0 offers. So why would you apply for a job like UWI, right? The implication being that what if that's your only offer? Why would you be willing to take this job? And the answer is, you know, they call this place the Harvard of the Caribbean, right? There's a reason for that. And it's not because of the climactic similarities, right? But that's what it is, right? This is the premier institution in the region. And so, and we can have a different conversation about, you know, sort of what that means more broadly, but it's true. And so, like, that's part of why we have high expectations for you, because for you guys, is because we know that you can, and because we know that you're going to leave here and you're going to change the region and you're going to build the region in ways that are going to have effects that last long past the lives of anybody with us today. So that's why I was willing to apply to and willing to come to UWI. So, Sarah, what was your question? Go ahead, Sarah.
I didn't really particularly have like a pressing question. The only thing that's been on my mind recently is, after you finish law school, like, how do you make that transition and eventually become a successful lawyer? Because in Trinidad, I've seen a lot of people come out of law school and can't get jobs, and it's difficult for them. But I was thinking maybe because I went to Cave Hill UWI, maybe that would give me some kind of boost compared to the students that went here, because, well, everybody has the opinion that Cave Hill is the better campus for law since it was the founding campus for it. So I thought, you know, maybe if I keep my grades up and I attend that campus, I would have better prospects. But in general, what would be like the steps you would take to get a job when you're out of school and whatnot?
Yeah. So I don't have a great answer for you because I don't have sort of deep roots in this community. So I don't know sort of how things work in the Caribbean. but in general, right, the hiring of new lawyers is somewhat idiosyncratic. So it sort of, everybody does it a little bit differently. So there's not really like one rule or one process that you can follow to make it happen. One of the things that I think is really important, that I think is really going to help you in sort of planning your job hunt, is to figure out what success looks like for you. Because success may not mean going into a high pressure firm environment and making a very high salary and, you know, working lots and lots of hours. You know, success may be, you know, something a little more low key that, you know, lets you keep body and soul together, but doesn't demand, you know, doesn't sort of take possession of your life. So those are, you know, and both of those are valid paths, right? I'm not telling you that either one is better, but I think that legal education has a tendency to push you into to push you toward thinking that success means whatever career path the faculty defines as being very prestigious. Okay, and that may not necessarily be what success looks like for you. So I think that, you know, I followed a very unconventional path to get to where I am. I'm happy to discuss that with you in more detail if you are interested sort of later, but I think that for now, you know, sort of the first thing for you to do is to figure out what you want out of a legal career. And then that sort of gives you some ideas for what to look for and maybe where you need to be pointing yourself. Okay. So Rihanna, what was your question?
So I don't necessarily remember my question, but I think it had something to do along the lines of like what we could expect in terms of like, I know that the faculty hasn't approved the assignments as yet for a lot of courses, but in terms of what you are proposing for us to do for the semester?
Yeah. So I'm not going to answer that, and I'm not going to answer it for two reasons. The first one is that it's very, very close to how do I get an A in the course. The other thing is, as you say, the administration has not approved our proposed assessments, and so we are not supposed to discuss them at all. What I can tell you is I did not make significant changes from what is contained in the faculty guide. There were some changes, but they're relatively minor. Okay, so that's sort of all the information that I have for you on that. At this point. Once we get the final high sign that we have been approved, we'll discuss it in more detail. Okay, Elan, you're up. What was your question?
Hi, sorry, my background's a bit loud. So I don't fully remember the question that I originally asked or sent in, but maybe you can give me clarity on this one, because this question that I've been thinking of, it sounds a little garbled, but maybe you can sift out the meat of it. So you spoke a lot about kindness and, in essence, empathy. I wanted to know how come, but I think you kind of answered that when you spoke a bit about yourself, but how do you connect that to law? Because sometimes law can seem so cut and dry and, you know, so how do you see kindness and empathy coming up? Or
I'm actually really glad you asked that, because I actually have a friend of mine that I'm going to, she's not going to come and talk to you guys, but she is going to record a video for you talking about her work. She's based in Chicago, and literally her job is she is a clemency specialist. So her job is to prepare documents and arguments to convince governors and the president to pardon or commute the sentences of prisoners. And she works for a nonprofit that does this work for low-income offenders. So, and she prepared, in December, she prepared 27 clemency petitions, federal clemency petitions, and President Trump granted 8 of them before he left office. And regardless of what you think about President Trump, and I have very strong opinions about President Trump, that record for her is tremendous. And that I think is a perfect example of where kindness and empathy in law play such an important role, right? This is literally, these are 8 people's lives that my friend like snatched from the jaws of the American mass incarceration machine. It's a damn miracle, right? These are 8 lives that she has saved. And it's something that she could only do if she were, that it's something that she can't do without kindness and without empathy. I'll give you another example, right? A friend of mine is a litigator in Huntsville, Alabama. And he found out through the grapevine that he had a case where opposing counsel's brother had died. And he called up opposing counsel and he said, "I'm so sorry to hear about your brother. Let's put a pause on all the deadlines in our case for as long as you need. And if you're not in a position to take care of it, tell me how much time you need and I will file the motion asking for the stay." That's what I mean by kindness in the practice of law. That's what I mean by empathy. So there you have it. Jaleesa, what was your question?
Hey, my question was, what would you say is the hardest thing or the most exhausting thing about being a lawyer?
I think that, it depends on the kind of person that you are, the kind of lawyer that you are, the kind of practice that you're in. For me, the hardest, most exhausting part of any of law practice was client management, because I was mostly a plaintiff's lawyer. Most of my clients were not terribly sophisticated people. They didn't necessarily have a lot of legal knowledge. And so I had to do a lot of hand-holding and a lot of sort of helping people understand why I was doing the things that I was doing on their behalf, and why I would make the recommendations that I was making. It certainly, helped prepare me for the classroom, where you guys are all walking in not knowing anything about the stuff that I'm going to teach you. But it also, that was not a skill that came naturally to me. And so I really had to work at building that up. So, okay. We are out of time, but since there's only one of you left, we'll run over just a couple of minutes. So Cassie-Ann, what was your question?
Actually, Celeste and I had the same question, so we can conclude on time.
Okay, well, thank you so much. I really appreciate everybody's energy and enthusiasm. I really appreciate your questions. This is one of my favorite things to do with students, because you guys always challenge me and give me opportunities to think about things that I haven't necessarily thought about in a long time or ever. And so this is always a really wonderful opportunity for me. So Danielle, I'll tell you what, Danielle, why don't you email me your question, and if it's something that the rest of the class needs to hear, I will post my answer to e-learning, okay, rather than making everybody stick around. So I will let you guys go, and take care, and I'll see you next week. All right.